Hello, my lovelies. How are you today? I'm doing great. I am here. We're back for another episode of Evil Lives Here. I'm loving the fact that I'm trying to get into a groove, and I think I might have found it, but don't hold that to me yet. But no, I think we're on the right track to get back into this. So today's episode, we're in season 3, episode 9, titled Blood Atonement. So guys, get ready for a wild story. This one's going to be a long one too, so buckle up. I apologize in advance, but hang with me. We'll get through this. So first of all, hello. My name is Erin. This is Ageless Beauty with Erin. And we are talking the Evil Lives Here series that I watch on Discovery, or I think at ID channel. Discovery Plus is actually the app that I use. It is a paid subscription. It's really relatively cheap for what you get, so it's so worth it. But we'll get into this. Like I said, I don't want to haggle too long because this is going to be a long episode. So don't forget to like the video, share the video if you know others would like it, and hit that subscribe button. As always, everything that I use will be listed down below. We won't talk makeup because we have other important things to talk about. So, let's jump right in. I don't know why I put those over there. This video starts with, there's this lady, and she is looking through some old pictures and talking about the people in them. So she's looking at one, there's 5 men in this picture. And she's talking about her father, and she says, you know, the tall one is her father. And I learned later on that the reason she says that is her father was like 6'4", so he was pretty tall. But she's like, you know, these men, there are 5 men. She said, they look really happy right here. She said, you would think looking at them, they're a bunch of friends, living a normal life. Just, you know, nothing weird, nothing crazy. But she said that would be so far from the truth. And then another picture of just her father. And she says it's really, really hard to look at it, to look at him. There's not a lot of good memories. But she says, because of what he believed in and forced his family to live by, that caused so much pain, so much just torture. I don't know if torture is the right word, but it was so much pain, so much just craziness. I will say it was craziness, but it was all they knew. So we can seriously sit here and look at it and say, oh my God, what the hell was they thinking, or what were they doing? But in all honesty, it's all these guys knew. All these kids knew. So, and they never had the opportunity to do anything different than what their father told them. So now Discovery is telling us that Estefania, I think is her name. It's like Stefania with an E. So it just might be Estefania. I need to just choose a way and say it because she is the one telling us the story. She's the one that I'm going to be saying her name a lot. So she is telling us that her father was E.L.F. LeBaron. And no, actually, Discovery is telling us this as it comes up. It says that he died in prison for his heinous crimes. And we start seeing, and we do this a lot through this episode, which I find very cool, but they show us news broadcasts, you know, actual live footage that went on during that time. So right now we're seeing her father, E.L.F, walking with cops in handcuffs. And the broadcaster says, and I quote, that E.L.F was often referred to as the Mormon Manson End quote. Wow. I mean, let's get serious. Nobody wants to be compared, or I would hope nobody would want to be compared to Manson, but I'm not really sure in this case. So, I mean, he was the Mormon Manson, and I did actually see this mentioned again a couple times when I did my research after the episode aired. So, Discovery tells us then that several of Estefania's siblings are still behind bars for life. It's just a big, family affair, right? So there's more news coverage. Like I said, it was really cool because you got to see this coverage at this time. You know, because it's old footage. And you get to see how they did things, I guess is how I'm trying to say that. But you're seeing footage now of covered bodies, obviously dead, being removed and taken out of a house, some pretty good sized house. And the broadcaster comes back and telling us that the followers that murdered are... I don't really know. He said the followers. So it could have been the ones that are dead, or it could have been the ones that are murdered. In this case, it could have been either. But they belong to a church called Lamb of God. So, Estefania is telling us that she never has told her whole story. Like, she's never sat down and talked to anybody to tell her side, or not her side, her story. That she's told bits and pieces throughout her life, but she's never told all of it. And that's what she's doing with Evil Lives Here. She is here to tell her story of what she lived through. And what she lived through, what she went through, you know. So now we're seeing pictures of her family, her as a young child, and her family. And I'm just going to say that there's a lot of siblings that I'm seeing, right, in these pictures. It's just unbelievable. But I don't think I've mentioned this. It is a polygamous sect. And that explains it. So Estefania is telling us that people need to know the truth of what happened, but it is hard for her to tell. And then we get that cool, you know, Evil Lives Here introduction that we all, okay, maybe not we all, that I absolutely love. I love that cool introduction. And, you know, it goes into the introduction, and we're going to hear this story from the beginning from Estefania. So there's just basically the layout of what is coming, right? They like to give you just enough to tease you, just enough to kind of make you go, damn. And then they're going to, you know, go back to the beginning. So she starts talking about her father, Ervil, and he was a Mormon polygamist, and her mother was one of, quote, his 13 wives, end quote. Holy shit. 13 wives? But it gets better. So she said then she had around 51 siblings. And honestly, I thought there was a lot of siblings in that picture because there's probably like 10 to 12 of them. 51? What? Okay. So now Stefania is telling us that many of the wives lived together. So like, he had so many wives, he couldn't live with them all. So he would put them together. And Stefania's mom, and I don't think I ever wrote it down. I didn't. But her mother lived with her sister, who was also one of Ervil's wives. And they lived together with all their children, which I think, if I remember correctly, looking it up afterwards, there was 6 of them with the mom, the sister, and the children. Might have been 7. I'm thinking one had 4, one had 3. Might have been 7. But, well, you know, I guess they're just going to keep it all in the family. It's just a lot for my poor little brain to wrap around at first. It really was, because I just kept going, I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't understand. So anyways, so Stefania is saying that she didn't know what polygamy was growing up. I mean, it was just the way things were. There was multiple wives with multiple kids all living together at all times. She thought, and had no reason not to, but she thought everybody in the world lived that way. I get it. When she's telling us, he was the leader of their church. Her father, Ervil, was the leader of the church. And he was considered to be, in their eyes, equal to the Pope. He was God's representative, on earth, right? Which meant that his children, and especially his daughters, were extra special, as they were the daughters of the prophet. And that meant they had a big obligation as the daughters. They had big obligations because there was a lot expected of them, because it was their job to set and build the kingdom of God on earth. I kid you not, that is exactly what she said. And I'm sorry. She really doesn't get into it, and I'm glad. Because I hate to think what those expectations were. I mean, come on. I don't think any of us are so naive that we don't know exactly what those obligations were. However, like I said, Stefania does not get into it. She really does not talk about it much. Okay. So then she says her father kept all of them, shocker, but he kept all of them isolated. They were not, apparently they went to school at first, so they were an outside school, but they were not allowed to intermingle, have friends outside of their siblings. So if they did go to school, they were not allowed to play or do anything with them. Said he was keeping them away from everybody because he didn't want them influenced by the devil. And she says she remembers she was always the loner. Always by herself. I mean, I guess maybe except for her sibling or 20. But when it came to school, she was just pretty much always on her own. And she just never quite understood why she wasn't allowed to go and play and be with friends or, you know, whatever. I get it. I mean, come on. She said that her dad even didn't want them to have a TV or radio. They were not allowed to listen to radios or televisions because it was the devil's outside influence coming in, you know? So she said they were just so isolated. And she said her mom snuck in a television. So she brought it in, but it was something that they were not allowed to ever tell anybody that they had. So they had to keep it hidden. They had to act like they had no idea what anybody was talking about as far as, you know, television programs and things like that. And she tells us, she's like, I loved Gilligan's Island. Who didn't? Come on. Gilligan's Island. But she said she always imagined herself as Ginger. And it was so much fun for her. She always liked that, right? It was just kind of her fantasy. She wanted to be Ginger, and she wanted to be on this show, blah, 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 right? And, but in the back of her mind, she knew what they were doing was wrong because her dad had just preached that they weren't allowed to have televisions and radios or anything. So she thought she was going to be in trouble because of it. So, or actually she thought she was going to go to hell because of it. Because she knew what she was doing wrong and she was still doing it. So she just was convinced she was going to go to hell. Now, in that same sense, she doesn't say they quit watching it or any, God, I got a mess. Or anything like that. She just said she knew it was wrong, but she loved it. I just hate that. I absolutely hate that. The things we take for granted, right? Okay. So she said that her dad was hardly ever home. Which, let's be real, he had 13 wives. He had places he needed to be and whatever. I don't know how anybody could possibly live and be happy with that kind of an arrangement. I don't know. But apparently, that's exactly what it was. So her dad wasn't home often. And her mother would tell her that her dad was just so important doing God's work. That's why he wasn't home. It's not because he doesn't want to be there with you. It's because he is so important. You know, he's got so much work to do for God. And why would she think otherwise? That's what she's being told by her mother and her aunt. And her dad is making everybody, tell everybody how important he is, whatever. So she really had no reason to disbelieve, right? But her mom also told her that they were to never talk to the cops. Okay? That the cops were after them. That they were the devil's agents. That the police were influenced by the devil and were out to get her father. So they were to never talk to the police. However, one day, she said, the police showed up at the house. And her brother answered the door. And he was 10. So he was younger than her at this time, I guess. I kind of get the feeling they were really close in age. I don't know. It's a guess. They don't really tell us much of this. But her brother answers the door and is talking to the police. And the police are asking where their dad is. Well, one of Dad's followers grabbed the remaining children, ran downstairs, and hid them in the basement. And she says she doesn't know how long they were down there. She said it felt like forever, right? But she doesn't know. And when they finally left, the dad's follower, he come down, he had the brother, and it was telling them they were never to talk to the police and never let them in the house. And she says, and I quote, or she says that her brother who let him in the house, and I quote, got whipped so hard, end quote, because he did that. Because what he did was wrong. He let the devil's men into their house. So Stefana said that they learned really quick. They don't talk to the cops, Yes, they had been told that, but this was the first time they're seeing the cops come to their house and the consequences of opening the door for them, which is, the brother getting his butt whooped. It is not wanting to blend. Okay, sorry. So, Stefana says that they never really understood why the cops were looking for her father. She, as a kid, didn't understand this. But then, she was finally let on into a little family secret. her father was willing to kill for his faith. Okay. So the cops are looking for him because he is willing to kill, or has killed. I'm not going to say much of a spoiler alert there. We expected it. But he had ordered some murders. So she tells us that her daddy not only believed in polygamy and had multiple wives and kids, but he believed wholeheartedly, like his whole church was based around blood atonement. Now, she explains to us that blood atonement comes from the idea, and I'm reading this direct, that Jesus Christ died for our sins. However, there are some people that sin so greatly that Jesus couldn't atone for them. So they have to die to atone for their own sins. So therefore, they are murdered. And she tells us that her father was in jail and being persecuted by the devil's people for blood atoning his own brother. And she actually felt her dad was a martyr because he was told by God who to kill, or who to atone, I guess you should say. That no one else understood because they were Gentiles. And since they didn't understand, they persecuted her father. But her father was willing to pay for doing God's will. Now this is, she said this is what she thought growing up. This was how they were raised, And it explains why she was so scared having the television, because she knew it was doing wrong and she was still doing it. She thought she was going to be atoned. So, what a sad way to live, right? So she tells us that she is very attached to her mother. Like, they are always together, always doing things together. But one day she wakes up and her mommy's gone. And she has no idea where she's going. Nobody will tell her anything. Just her mom's gone. And she asked her aunt. And her aunt tells her that she wasn't coming back. So Estefania had no idea if her mom was dead or alive. That, it was just, she was gone one day and nobody was telling her anything. And, she talks about how they're just like, well, we don't know if she's dead or alive, and we're just going to throw everything she owns out in the trash. So yeah, everything that she had, all her stuff, was put in the dumpster. And everybody was okay with this. Even Estefania never said anything. Maybe there was something that she wanted that her mom had that she could have kept. I don't know. It just seems very weird. Very odd. One day you wake up, mom is gone, and she's dead, or we don't know, but we're throwing her stuff away. And then Estefania tells us that she missed her mother more than anything. Like, she constantly cried over missing her mother, which shouldn't surprise anybody. I would. I did when my mom passed. But then she would get in trouble for it. Like, she wasn't supposed to be crying over her mother, but she couldn't help it. So, she misses her mom, and, she's not supposed to. She's not allowed to. Then she tells us that her dad got out of jail. So he had been in jail and didn't even spend like a year in jail before he was released. And at that point, he decided to completely move them and pull them out of school, get them away from all of society, get them away from the devil and everything else that could influence them away from him and his teaching. So they moved to a ranch. It was a big house, but they all called it the ranch. And it had some acres, and I never really figured out where, and I'll explain this later. There's so many different places that have been thrown about where they were. I'm really not 100% sure where any of these were and where it happened. But, so he moves all the kids. He wants them away from the devil's influence. He wants them to be 100% pure. And the only people that influence them are him. He wants to be the only one having any kind of influence on the children. Ow. I keep pinching my eye. So, they move and they all live in this big old house called Ranch, and they're disconnected from the world, and they can only focus on Ervil's teachings and what he says. And, you know, his thing was, he talked about the Battle of Armageddon, and they were there to save the world, and anybody that sinned, anybody, was to be atoned. So, Stefania says a lot of people were killed because they sinned. That was just how her life was. That was it. And that is such a sad, awful way to live. But that's just all she knew. If you sinned, you had to be atoned, so you died. And you did what you were told. So, you didn't have a choice on the matter, on anything really. This is how it was. This is what you were told to do. What an awful, awful way to live, right? So, and she was really scared that she wasn't going to make it. She was going to be atoned. I mean, remember, she already watched television. She already wanted to be Ginger from Gilligan's Island. So she was for sure that she had sinned and she was going to be atoned. Atoned. And she just didn't quite understand. She said when the adults would talk about the scripture and all the stuff that they were pushing on them, she didn't understand what the teachings meant, why they had to do it. You know, I guess in a way she was a rebel, and she just didn't quite feel like she should blindly follow them. And, you know, that was dangerous. That was really dangerous not to blindly follow and to question. So she was for sure she was going to be atoned. She was petrified. She thought there was no other way out for her. So, you know. Okay, so in 1980, Ervil was arrested again and sentenced to life in prison for ordering the murder of a rival Mormon leader. So again, we're seeing old footage of Ervil in prison. And Stefani says that once he was in prison, he knew that he needed someone else to take control because he was going to be there for a while. I don't know. He got out on 2 separate occasions that I know that was mentioned. But this time, I don't think he was getting out, and I think he knew he wasn't getting out. So, he needed someone else to be in control. He needed to find another leader. So, that's for, you know. And he anointed her brother, his son, Arthur, to be his successor. So, Arthur was taking over the reins part-time. Dad was still alive, and as long as Dad was alive, everybody was still listening to everything Dad had to say. And I say that because later on we find out that Daddy was very active while he was in jail. And his followers, I really wanted to call him something else, but his followers still actively did everything he told them to. So, on August 15th, 1981, Ervil was found in his jail cell dead. So, he's the big bad, right? So far, Ervil is the big bad in this story that we have been talking about. So his death should be the end of the story. Let me just tell you, not even by a long shot is this story done. Yeah. Hang on, kiddos. So, the news reports, where did my towel go? That the news reported that Ervil was found dead in his jail cell due to a heart attack. And it's very clearly stated that there was no foul play. As Stefania says, they all believed he was killed to shut him up. You know, the hand of the devil finally got him. I can see that would think that. I really can. So, and she was told, all the kids were told, the enemy killed him. The enemy was coming. They were to be on guard, right? So now Arthur, who had been anointed, it was his job to step up. It was his job to figure out what God wanted them to do. And, you know, take the role that his daddy left. But not everybody was happy with Arthur being anointed, right? There was another little section, another little group that didn't want to follow him. Okay, so the main guy of that group, his name's Leo. He didn't want Arthur to be in charge, and he wasn't going to follow him. He had been a devout follower of Ervil, and he did not think he should follow Ervil's son. So he had a little group. I think it started with like 4 to 5 different men following him that all agreed. They were the older group of this, you know, that had been with the dad from the beginning. And so they were all following Leo. And Leo came to them one day. And it's not, I want to take that back. It was mostly men, but I do know there was a woman too. And Leo came to him one day and said he had a revelation from God that he was the one that was supposed to be in charge, not Leo. And he convinced this crew to follow him and side with him, which essentially divided the family, right? You had those that were following Arthur, and you had those that followed Leo. And one morning, Leo and his crew approached Arthur. They were outside. I really don't know what. It looked like Arthur was chopping, not Arthur. Yeah. He was chopping wood. You know, taking care, but he was pretty much by himself, and 4, 5 different men came up to talk to him. And the reenactment, let's take it for what it's worth. The reenactment's not always the best acted, you know. You're not getting Brad Pitt out there or Tom Cruise. And that's okay. It's you get an idea of what's going down. And in this case, it shows Leo and Arthur talking, and Leo puts his hand out to shake Arthur's hand, and when he does, the other men grab Leo. The other men grab Arthur. So Leo's men have grabbed Arthur, and they start to beat him. And Arthur somehow, 1 against 5, somehow gets free and starts running away, in which at that point, one of the men pull out a gun and shoot him in the back. And he was shot 5 times and killed. They picked him up, threw him in the back trunk of their car, and left. And apparently, because nobody wants to make, nobody made sure that there was nobody watching. Apparently, Estefania saw all of it. And she said she saw when it went down, and Leo and his group put him in the car and drove off. And that was the last time anybody ever saw Arthur. And Estefania says that's when they all knew they weren't safe, right? That the enemy was actually now in their home. They've been raised to think the cops were the enemies and other people were their enemies, but the enemies were actually now inside their home, right? And at this point, she starts crying as she's looking at pictures of Arthur, because she's like, I loved him so much. He was my big brother, and she missed him. So she said if things had stayed the same with him and he hadn't been murdered, things would have been different. So apparently he was against some of the stuff that Daddy preached. So she says after Arthur's murder, Leo and the followers that were with him split off the group and moved to a whole nother area, right? And another one of her brothers became the new prophet and leader. That was Heber, Heber. Some of these names are kind of weird. So now we see a picture of Heber. He's 19 years old. Now he is the leader. And she says that once he was anointed, they all kind of went into survival mode because they realized they weren't safe. That Leo was still out there and could come and get them at any time. So they went into survival mode, and instead of going to the cops, because they still believed the cops were the devil's, the devil's men, working for the devil. So they never went to the cops about this. Instead, Heber decided that they needed to be prepared for what they considered Leo's group to be, which was a rival group now. They were the enemy. They were the rival group. So Heber decided to get all of them weapons. Yeah. So he is arming young children and, teaching them, at least he taught them how to use guns. And, Estefania tells me, she's telling me personally, but she's telling us that she got her own .22 rifle and learned how to use it. And they were taught how to use them and to be prepared to use them to protect themselves. They were ready for battle. This was their war that they were going to win, right? And she thought it was a great thing that she now was protected, that she now had her own weapon because she could take care of herself, and she was not going to be afraid to use it if needed. So now these kids, which she's still a kid, I don't know how old she is, but she's still a kid, is walking around armed. So Estefania tells us that shortly after Arthur got killed, she started noticing people were disappearing. And nobody talked about it. They were just gone, right? So Heber is in charge. Leo has taken his group and basically in hiding. And now she's noticing people are missing. They were just gone. So she tells the story. She said her aunt who she's still living with, wanted to leave. So she wanted out of the group. She was done. Whatever. I don't know if it's even a possibility to leave a group like that. And in this case. However, as she was trying to pack to leave, Heber showed up and wanted a word with her. So Stefania said, yeah, I felt really uneasy when Heber showed up. And she said that her aunt, I think she called her Yolanda, Aunt Yolanda, her mom's name, if I'm not mistaken, was Teresa, and their last names were Rios, but before marrying the same man. She said, when her mom disappeared, Aunt Yolanda became her surrogate mother, right? It was the person that took care of her and she lived with, and, she really loved her, her aunt, her mother. But now, where's it at? Sorry. She didn't, she was her mom's youngest sister, and she was scared to lose her because she didn't want to live on the ranch by herself without her. So, not much is said after that, but I do believe Miss Teresa got atoned. And I don't know, she never talked about what Teresa's sin was. I don't know, she might not have known at the time. I'm sure it's not something that they all talked about, but her aunt was taken from her. And apparently after that, things did not get any better. Oh, that's a lot. So, yeah. We'll fix that. Leo's crew was still targeting the adults. Right? And he thought that one of the things he could do was take the children. So Heber was with his wife in the city because his wife was having a baby. And all the children, don't ask me why, but all the children were left alone on the ranch. I don't know where the other the adults were. It's never mentioned. But Leo thought that would have been a great time to attack, with the goal of getting these kids and taking them back with him. So Leo was going to grab the kids and have them join his sect. Right? Well, they were warned, one of the brothers, because they had lookouts. They knew this was going to happen. They knew at some point Leo was going to come back. And especially when Heber wasn't there, they were keeping an eye on things. So the brother that was on lookout came running in and told them there were men there to get them. And she says, I looked out the window because they were just doing their chores. So she was like washing dishes or something. She looked out the window, sees these two men in all black coming in, and they are armed, right? So she's got all the siblings that's with her, and she tells them to run. Grab your weapons and run. So they all run out into the woods. And, okay, the men are chasing them. I just lost the lash. The men are chasing them, but I don't think there was like an intention of shooting them or whatever. They really wanted them to come back and be part of their group. And so they were getting away, and the guys were like, stop or we'll shoot. None of them did. And, she's saying that they were, I'm getting this all over my hand because I can't see. The men were getting really close to, they had split up. So some of the kids went one way, her and a couple others went another. She said they were getting really close to where she was with the siblings she was with, when one of the sisters that was across the way shot at the men, which scared them. They didn't look to retaliate. It scared them because they did not realize that the kids was going to be armed and willing to shoot, right? So they ran off. They left. Because the goal wasn't to kill these kids, it was to take them back with them. So they hightailed it out of there. And, yeah. So, after that, they lived in fear, though, that somebody was always going to come in and try to take them again. So they set their own schedule to guard the place, right? To keep somebody always on duty to watch over everybody. So that's what they did. They started their own little guard unit. So, yeah, as children. So then Estefania is telling us that things became difficult. And I'm like, really? Your life was so easy to begin with. What do you mean it became difficult? Jeez. But, yeah, apparently it became difficult. It became complicated. And people started walking around on eggshells. And she thought, again, her paranoia, and I don't know, she doesn't say why, but her paranoia was getting to her, and she thought she was going to be blood atoned again. She thought it was her time. They were coming for her, and whatever. She really thought this was it. She wasn't going to live past this. So she said she took her sisters aside and told them, if you are the one that's told to blood atone me, you have to do it. Said, if you don't, your punishment will be a lot worse than would it be to be atoned. So I really don't even want to know what would be worse than being dead, but apparently. But she said she was really scared because the blood atonement, when that was given to somebody, was a test. She said it was, a test you weren't allowed to fail. So if one of her sisters were told they had to blood atone her to kill her, she wanted them to do it. She didn't want them to get any kind of trouble. Didn't want them to fail this test. She said she got to the point she was talking to them daily about it. If it comes down to it, you have to do this type of thing. So she was paranoid. And she said it was a test that they weren't going to fail. So she was making sure that they would not fail. I get that, I guess. So she's talking about how her youngest brother got chose for military mission. Now, military missions are missions that they're given basically kill orders. They go out on this mission and they are to kill and atone. I shouldn't say kill. They didn't think they were killing anybody. They were atoning people, right? Why is this slash wanting to be difficult? So he is being given this military mission and he doesn't want to do it. He's scared. But again, you don't have an option. When you are given an order, like, military mission or to atone somebody, you do it. And you don't ask questions and end of story. So she said, I was sitting here telling him, you have to do this. You have to. You got to go. You don't have an option. This is not a choice you get to make. So she was convincing her brother to go kill somebody. So he went. And this is when Discovery comes back on, pops up there and says that what that group did on their military service made the news. So then it comes back to the body bags being taken out of the house, right? So the broadcasters, news, whatever, was talking. And it says that the former Mormons, I cannot talk today, I apologize. The former Mormons that went on a killing spree, guided by a misguided belief in blood atonement. There are a lot of dead bodies that they're showing on this. I mean, a lot. And the newscaster says it was probably the most violent Mormon polygamist sect in history. I would want to say that Mormon polygamous sects aren't that common, but polygamy was allowed in Mormon church for a number of years. And I have seen, unfortunately, many of these stories like this. So, yeah, I'd like to think it's not common, but I'm thinking it's probably more common than we want to believe. So now, Stefania's sister finally told her what happened. Like, she didn't even know what happened, right? She wasn't keeping up with it, and apparently they had been keeping up with the newspaper. I guess when they got up their own group, they thought it wise to start keeping up with the newspapers. So, the group went out to kill the men that were with Leo, right? And they are Edward, Mark, and Dwayne. And they were loyal servants to E.L.F, but not to E.L.F's son. They had no loyalty to Leo, and then Leo had no loyalty to Arthur, and who he killed, or Heber, who was now in charge. And those three men I just mentioned were the three that were the three that would do what E.L.F told them to do. So when E.L.F gave a kill order, those were the three that would go out and proceed to murder people. Thinking they weren't that big of a loss, but I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. However, a mistake was made. That's what they called a mistake. So Stefania talks about being relieved that the three men that were, the ones that were trying to kidnap her and her brothers to take them to her sect are now gone. And she said, I shouldn't have felt relief, but I did. Because they were threatening their life, right? But something did go wrong. And the order they had was to kill, I think, Leo and those three men. However, Dwayne's young daughter, she was 8, Jenny, was also murdered. I really don't know the details. She wasn't supposed to be there. I do know that. And she was. And she lost her life. So they assassinated 3 of the men and the daughter. And that became known as the 4 o'clock murders. I really don't know why it was named the 4 o'clock murder. Nothing was ever said that it was named the 4 o'clock murders because of any specific reason. But you know there was. My guess is probably when the murders happened. So, the adults in Heber's group all scattered, ran for the hills. Ran for their life, and in doing so, abandoned Estefania and all the other children that were at the ranch that they were taking care of. So, in the self-interest of themselves and getting out and not being caught, they left the kids. And I don't know how many. She doesn't say. And I don't know the ages. I know the ones that they show, that she shows, are a little bit older, like her. She was the oldest, and she was not, she was a teenager. But I know there had to have been young ones, because there was always young ones. There was always babies. So, yeah, these self-righteous men that are doing God's work ran for their life and abandoned their kids and a bunch of other kids. I mean, it wasn't just a bunch of kids. So they had no idea what to do. They now had to survive on their own and take care of these kids on their own and have no idea when anybody was going to come back to help them, to get them, to save them. And in a weird twist, she decided that while they wait, they were going to do a prayer circle. They would literally sit in a circle 24 hours a day where somebody during that 24 hours would always be praying. I truly believe in the power of prayer. You will never hear me say anything else. However, not probably what I would have done in the situation. I don't know. Thankfully, I wasn't in the situation, and I don't have to be, tested on what I would or wouldn't do in this situation. So after several days of being in the circle in constant prayers, one of her sisters is like, oh, I got it. I know why God has forsaken us. One of the men they were supposed to kill is still alive. We need to go and kill him. Again, not necessarily where my mind went when you're talking prayer circles and other things. But yeah, their mind went, the one that got away. It was time for him to die. He shouldn't have got away. He was guilty. He's the reason, him being alive is the reason why God has forsaken them and they're not getting any blessings. And nobody's there to help take care of them. Okay. Sure. What do you say to that? I don't know. However, Estefania agreed. And it was now her mission, her new mission in life, for her and her sister to go and be the ones to kill the surviving man. That's a first for Evil Lives here. Yeah. The person telling us the story, is saying that she's going to go kill somebody. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to live. The order was for him to be atoned. So she said it was simple. They all her and her sister got in a car and drove to the guy's house. Now she said it was like 1,000 miles away, and I'm like, that's a pretty good drive, dude. And you're just leaving, you're the oldest. And you're leaving all these young siblings again. Just leaving them. To drive 1,000 miles away to kill this guy. I've heard crazy things before. Might be one of the craziest. So as they are driving to kill said man, she said they're praying for strength. Strength to do this. Strength to do what is needed for their family. And she says, when she gets there, and they knock on the door, he answers. And, obviously he's a little, hey, what are you doing here? This is weird. So she's like, they were trying to play it off, play it cool, and she says she's like talking to him, just trying to make chit chat, small talk, until she got the nerve to kill him. And she's like, yeah, talking about things like they're there to see if he had heard from any of the congregation or, the ones that just killed all your sect, and because they haven't made it back home. That's a little suspicious. I wouldn't go to the guy that survived and say, hey, do you know where the guys that tried to kill you are? Because I don't. Yeah, I don't know. It's a little weird. But she's, and apparently they came armed with knives because they had the reenactment showed them having the knives behind their back. But she said when the guy asked her and her sister if they wanted to come in, she chickened out. She said she couldn't do it. So they left. And they didn't kill anybody. So, yeah, they just went back home. And still had no idea where anybody or anything was. And then one day, the brother that she had encouraged to go on the military service and kill some poor innocent souls, he shows up at the house one day. And he's sitting there talking to her, and she said this is when things really changed for her. So he's been in hiding, and then during this time, he realizes that everything that they thought and knew was wrong. That everything that her father or their father preached was not real. It was all a complete lie. He had come to this conclusion, unfortunately, after he had already committed murder. But he had come to this complete conclusion, and he was there to tell her. And she was relieved. Remember, she's always questioned what they tried to preach her in this, or preach to them in their scripture. So she was really relieved, and she's like, okay, so what do we do? Because the thought of everybody that had died in name of their religion that was not real was very devastating to her. There was just so much pain and loss, right? So her brother was so guilt-ridden about the ones that killed and little Jenny dying. And I don't know if he was like the reason she died or if he killed her, but he was guilt-ridden and he was going to turn himself in. And he's like, if I get the death penalty, so be it. It's over with, but I've got to stop this. I need this to be over with. So he told the police everything. And they hadn't arrested anybody yet in these murders. They hadn't found anybody to arrest. So, that kind of broke up the whole thing and opened it up for the police. And because of what he did, 6 of the siblings were prosecuted and are now in prison, even now. So the brother that turned himself in struck a plea bargain. And he served 5 years for his part. And Estefania has asked that his name not be released because he's out of prison now and he's living his life. And she doesn't want... he deserves to have his life private. Okay. So Heber and 3 others received sentences ranging from 45 years to life in prison. So then the FBI showed up one day to talk to Estefania and told her they actually found her mother. So we're back to Mama missing. And she had been in a mental hospital in Fort Worth, for 5 years. So I don't know where she was at when she left, But for the last 5 years, she'd been in this hospital. And they took her to see her mom. And when her mother came out, she didn't recognize her. Didn't know her. Didn't know, because here's another thing. Another age. She was 16. So all this happened. She was the oldest and in charge at 16. And when her mother left, she was 9. So for a couple of years, she was on her own. Then she ended up in the mental hospital. But apparently, the stress and mom could not handle having lived through what she did with E.L.F. And that's what ended up in the, mental hospital. And Stefania said, I had to convince her I was who I said I was. Because she was expecting this kid, this 9-year-old kid, the age I was when she left. And I'm not that kid anymore. So she said she finally convinced her. And she was so glad she did. She got to spend some time with her mom. Because shortly after all that, her mom passed away. Apparently she'd been sick. It doesn't really say much. But she was very glad that she got to spend the last however much with her mother. That, she thought she'd been atoned. And her mom was alive this whole time. So at least she wasn't still in the family, I guess, in the sect. So she says, Stefania said she finally found her own path after getting away from the cult. And she finally got to do things that she has wanted to do that she was never able to do, like buy her own clothes, and go on dates. Things that were forbidden to her. And she said she also became an atheist for a few years. Like, she was so done with being told God this, God that, Jesus died for you, whatever, that she decided to be an atheist. She wasn't going to believe in anything. She said, I just couldn't. I couldn't believe in anything at this point for everything that I've been through. She said now, though, she's a spiritual person more than a religious person. She said she believes in doing good things and sharing that kind of thing. But it's also been very hard for her to escape her father's legacy. And that for years, people believe E.L.F. still had control over his congregation, even in jail. Wait a minute. No, after his death. They believed that E.L.F. still had control over some of them, even after his death. And she's like, that's completely not true. He has no control over me. And the siblings that he had control over are all in jail. So, but even the siblings that are in prison no longer believe what E.L.F. was saying. So they've all saw the light and they've got, found their path and realized what was wrong and what they've been taught all their life was not true. They knew, and she knows to this day, they were brainwashed. Like, he was a master manipulator and brainwashed so many people to do what he wanted. So it looks like Estefania married and had her own children as well. So that's how the episode ends. She talks a little bit about herself, and I don't think I mentioned it. Did I? No, I guess I'll get to it. A little bit more about her. So that's when I run myself over to DuckDuckGo to do a little research and to see what I can find. Now, we'll start with Wikipedia again. Like I said, last time, it's really weird because Wikipedia didn't used to always pop up and now it's like there. But Ervil Morel LeBaron, born February 22nd, 1925, passed away August 15th, 1981. Was the leader of a polygamous Mormon fundamentalist group who ordered the killings of many of his opponents, both within his own sect and in rival polygamous groups. He didn't care if you were in his group or not. If you were a rival of some sort, you were done. Out. Whatever. He used his religious doctrine of blood atonement to justify his murders. He was sentenced to life in prison for orchestrating the murder of an opponent and died there. He had at least 13 wives in his polygamous marriage, several of whom he married while they were underage. This dude just gets better and better. Just better. And many of them were involved in the murders that he ordered. So, looking at this Wikipedia page, this whole family is just a freaking mess. So, it all started with Ervil's father, who had 2 wives and numerous children of his own. And when the Church of the Latter-day Saints officially abandoned the practice of polygamy, his father moved the family to Mexico, and he wasn't going to give up his multiple wives and the way he lived and blah, blah, blah. So, he moved to Mexico and started his first church. And when he passed away, he anointed Joel, who is Ervil's older brother. So, Joel stayed in Mexico, which is where he moved to, and Ervil moved to San Diego. And he started his own church. But he ordered the murder of Joel. And then Ervil was arrested and put in jail in Mexico. And he spent about 5 years. So this is his first time. He spent 5 years in the jail before an appeal got him out on a technicality. So after Joel was murdered, the youngest brother, Verlin, I want to know how you have Joel, Ervil, and Verlin. Joel's only normal name, right? Anyways, so the youngest sibling, Verlin, took over Joel's church. And it was said that Ervil spent the next decade trying to have him murdered. Okay, so Ervil wasn't just an evil man. I don't care how you put it. I just don't see any other way to explain the fact that this man was even evil. I mean, hell, his name even has evil in it. Take the R out. Anyway, so he focused on his rival polygamous leaders and had to have them murdered. Including one guy, Bob Simmons. He was just a polygamous leader, and he ministered to Native Americans. In 1977, he ordered another murder of a polygamous leader that his 13th wife and his stepdaughter, so Ervil's 13th wife and his stepdaughter, carried out the murder. And another one of his wives, number 10, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for another murder that Ervil ordered. He was also linked to the death of one of his 17-year-old daughters. So she was 17, pregnant with her second child, and wanted out. She was done with the group. She wanted to move out, move on her own. Obviously, that doesn't happen. You don't leave the group. So she was murdered while she was pregnant. There were so many murders, so many orders. This video would be hours long. So I'm not going to go into all that. So while Ervil was in prison, he wrote a 400-page Bible known as the Book of the New Covenants, which included a commandment to kill disobedient church members who were included in a hit list written by LeBron while in jail. And they printed 20 copies of these to distribute. Now, at one point, Estefania talks about when they were being preached to, and they would have their Bible, the Book of Mormon, and her father's book that he wrote. I'm assuming this is the book that she said they were using in their sermons. So 3 of the murders were carried out simultaneously on June 27, 1988. So this is Heber's death, or Heber's the 4 o'clock where he was involved. So dad's already dead. The kids, and Estefania's at the place, and this is when all hell breaks loose, right? So this is it. June 27, 1988 at 4 p.m. That's why it's called the 4 o'clock murders. Dwayne Chenoweth, who was Ervil's former follower and the number one person that carried out Ervil's commands, was shot and killed, and his 8-year-old daughter, Jennifer, while they were running errands. Eddie Marston, one of LeBaron's stepsons, and another one that carried out Ervil's orders, was killed in the same manner, with a shotgun, and it didn't say where he was at. And then Mark Chenoweth, a father of 6, shot multiple times in his office in Houston, Texas. So when they went after these 3, they went after them simultaneously, all in different places. So I'm confused why there was the video of all the people being taken out. I don't know. So of the 7 killers involved in the 4 o'clock murders, 5 were found guilty of murder. It has been estimated that more than 25 people were killed as a result of Ervil's prison cell orders. That little book that he wrote, that they somehow were allowed to have 20 copies made and distribute. 25 people were killed. So now we're leaving that. We're going to an Oxygen, and they have a true crime series, and I've come across it a couple times. I've never really watched anything on there, but I have looked up some of their stories. It looks like it's a decent little thing, but this is a story told by Anna LeBaron, which is another one of Ervil's daughters, and her story here seems to be very similar to Estefania, so I don't think I need to recap too much of it because her story says the same. But it goes into a little bit more detail with the grandfather and Joel and the whole heritage of the polygamous group and how it fractured, and, Ervil trying to kill his brothers and whatever. There's a ton of articles on Ervil LeBaron and his cult. Many times he's mentioned as the Mormon Manson. And, now I get it. He is giving these orders. He's not necessarily lifting his hand and doing the killing. He's telling these followers to do it, and they're all putting their arms together singing Kumbaya while they carry him out. So now I'm on people.com, and there is an article called Daughters of the Cult. Who was polygamous cult leader Ervil LeBaron? And this is a very relatively new article. It's like it was published January 9th, 2024. So not even a month yet ago. So Hulu is doing a documentary, apparently. Okay? And it's going to be the same name, Daughters of the Cult, blah, blah, blah. And Anna is mentioned again. Apparently she is actually very involved in this series or show. I don't know if it's a series. I don't know if it's just a one show, whatever. But she's heavily involved and consulted on it. And it goes into the background of the LeBaron family, like I mentioned. All the dark history, all the brothers. The pictures that are on the people.com site are actually the same pictures that Estefania used in The Evil Lives Here, so you're not seeing anything different there. I'm not sure there's going to be a whole lot of difference, so I don't know if I'll watch it or not, but I thought it was interesting that Hulu has picked this up and made a show. Anna has a book that she's wrote. It's a memoir called The Polygamous Daughter. A memoir. And there's actually a lot of articles about Anna LeBaron. So she must be very vocal and outgoing about her story. And in the opposite way that Estefania had never talked about her story until this episode. So, however, Anna's story is different because she ran away from the cult at 13. So she's one of the few that actually got away. And she talks more about the women's role that Estefania hinted at, but never talked about. So, in a quote from BBC, hold on. Okay, Anna says, it was a patriarchy, for sure. and the young girls were groomed to become wives of polygamous men that already had wives. We were groomed to accept that and to know that that's where we were headed when we became of marriageable age. Marriageable age in the LeBaron family was 15. That's why Anna ran at 13. So all these articles are really the same. So I just kind of do a quick search of Ervil's children, see if I can find something a little different. There's so many of them, and believe it or not, there's not many mentioned besides Anna. Estefania came up, and I think maybe one more. So let's see. Most of what I see when I put in Ervil's children is Anna. She's kind of made herself the spokesperson of the group. Don't know if that's by choice or if any of the others even have that desire for her to be. I don't know. But I did find an article on cinemaholic.com about Estefania. And a quote from the website that Estefania gave says, in an interview with Good Morning America, in 2008, Estefania said she had been compelled to marry twice at the age of 13. So it contradicts a little bit where they said marriage age was 15, but at 13 she was already married twice. She also mentioned how she had seen members of her family get blood atoned. In a quote, I had my aunt and my younger sister who were blood atoned when she was 11, and it was traumatizing. Apparently she saw all that. She doesn't mention the episode, the Evil Lives Here episode. Something else she doesn't mention that in the Evil Lives Here episode. Like, she never once mentions that she had been married and whatever. Which we both know, or both of us, all of us know, that marriage would not have been legal. So, but she does say her brother changes her life. So she hints at it at the Evil Lives Here series, but here's a little bit more of how that happened. When he showed up to tell her, and he's the one that she convinced to go, and he turned himself in. Before he turned himself in, he helped her escape to come back to America. So I guess she was in Mexico at this time. Again, this is where it's really confusing on where they're at. Because I thought they were in Salt Lake City. But then he started his church in San Diego. But the brother was in Mexico. So it was really difficult. But she was in Mexico, and he helped her escape into America before he turned himself in. And that was in 1996. So she was able to pursue her dreams. So it says once she was away from that, once she was out, she was able to pursue her dreams and build her life. And she was a student of the Beverly Hill Playhouse to become an actor. Her acting career included a 2003 short story movie called Perils in Nude Modeling, where she was cast as one of the models. Then she was in the 2000s. Well, that was 2003. So then in 2004, she was in The Alamo. And she has, apparently The Alamo is a very good movie. I haven't seen it. But apparently she's still getting royalty checks, so it's done really well. And she has 6 more credits in English and Spanish language films released from 2006 to 2012. She also has a direction and a production credit in a documentary called Frozen in War. And she has her own production company called the LeBaron Productions, which is a company of professional video production studio. Let me say that again. The company is a professional video production studio located in Austin, Texas. Whew. Sorry about that. And as for her personal life, she has been married to Troy. Could not even pronounce that name if I wanted. Since 2015. She has a son from a previous relationship who is 23. He was 23 in 2021 when the article was written. So, and the only other thing that I see of Ervil's children, I can't even find anything on Heber or any of the boys. It's the 3 girls. And there's a Jacqueline LeBaron. She's 44. Probably a couple years ago. she was captured in Honduras. She was a part of the 4 o'clock murders and was on FBI's most wanted list. And they finally caught her. So I don't see anything else about any of the other kids and how they're doing. I mean, they're all still in jail. They're not all of them. The ones that are involved in the 4 o'clock murders are still in jail. Apparently they found the right, I don't know, is the right word? They found religion that isn't so screwed up. They found a religion that wasn't their dad's religion. So, yeah, it's really weird that I didn't see anything else about the siblings. So I'm going to close on that. Because like I said, this could be a couple hours long if I kept going on all the kids. There's 50 plus of them. And at that point, the kids were having kids, so there's grandkids. I won't go into that. But if you are interested in this horrible case, if there is something about this that said, I need to look this up. This seems a little fishy. There are lots of articles. There's the E.L.F here that I just discussed. There is the Hulu thing coming up. I'm not sure when it's coming out. And I don't think you'll have any problem finding information on this case. So, if you do, though, let me know. I'm curious if you watched it, what you think, what your thoughts are. And let me know about this episode. Comment, private message me, email, whatever you want. Just reach out. Let me know. Did you like it? What'd you think? It was a wild one. Because usually you stop at the main protagonist, Ervil. But no, this bad boy just kept going and going and going and going and going. So, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I love and appreciate every one of you. And until next time, goodbye.